Welcome to Speak Up Weekly, the podcast where we dive deep into innovative approaches to help nonverbal individuals find their voice. I'm Jaleesa, and I'm here with my co host.
Lisa, today we're exploring something really exciting: how music can transform the way we approach language development with AAC users.
I have to say, when I first heard about using music with AAC devices, I was skeptical. But then I heard about how some parents saw their children light up when we started incorporating songs into their communication practice. It was like something just clicked.
Exactly, Jaleesa. And what you witnessed wasn't just coincidence. There's actually fascinating research showing that music and language processing share neural pathways in the brain. When we combine music with AAC, we're essentially giving the brain multiple routes to the same destination.
That makes so much sense. But let's back up for our listeners who might be new to this world. Can you explain what AAC actually is?
Absolutely. AAC stands for augmentative and alternative communication. It's any form of communication that supplements or replaces speech for individuals who have difficulty with verbal communication. Right, the low tech options. Exactly. All the way up to sophisticated speech generating devices and apps on tablets, the high tech solutions. Now, here's where music becomes incredibly powerful. Recent studies from Northwestern University show that music training actually enhances speech processing in the auditory brainstem.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's not just about making therapy more fun.
Oh, it's so much more than that. Music engages rhythm, which is fundamental to language. Think about it. Speech has natural rhythms, stress patterns, intonation. When children struggle with language, they often struggle with these prosodic features too.
So you're saying music gives them a framework to understand these patterns?
Music provides a predictable structure that the brain can latch onto. Research by Francine and Schlauch at Harvard Medical School found that melodic intonation therapy literally rewires the brain, creating new neural pathways for language processing.
That's amazing. Now, let's get practical for our parent listeners. How can they start incorporating music into their child's AAC journey? I know many parents feel overwhelmed and don't know where to begin.
Great question, Jaleesa. Let's start simple. One of the most effective techniques is what we call sung requesting. Instead of just pressing a button for more, you can teach children to sing more, more, more to a simple tune.
Oh, I love this. So they're still using their AAC device, but adding that musical element.
Exactly. The melody helps with memory retention and makes the interaction more engaging. You can do this with any core vocabulary words. I want, to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, for example.
That's so clever. And it makes sense because most kids already know those familiar tunes. What about for children who are completely nonverbal? Can music still help them?
This is making so much sense to me. Can you walk us through some age specific approaches? I'm thinking about parents listening who have toddlers versus school age children versus teenagers. Does the music approach change? Absolutely. This is where music becomes even more powerful. We can use rhythm and beat to help children understand turn taking, which is fundamental to communication. Start with simple call and response patterns using instruments or even just clapping. For toddlers, we focus on sensory rich musical experiences. Think simple cause and effect interactions. They hit a drum and their AAC device says, boom. We're building that fundamental understanding that actions create communication. The songs are repetitive, short, and paired with lots of movement.
So they're learning the back and forth of conversation through music. That makes perfect sense, keeping it really concrete and immediate. What about school aged kids?
Right. And here's something really interesting. Research from Temple University shows that children with autism and other communication challenges often have enhanced musical processing abilities. We can leverage that strength to build language skills. School age children can handle more complex musical structures. We might use song verses to teach multi step communication sequences. For instance, First, I need to get attention. Then I say what I want. Then I say please. Each step gets its own musical phrase. They can also start composing their own simple songs to express feelings or tell stories through their AAC devices.
That's fascinating. So, we're not trying to fix a deficit, we're building on an existing strength. I love that perspective. Can you give us a specific example of how this might work with a high tech AAC device? And teenagers, I imagine they might be more resistant to what they perceive as childish approaches.
Sure, many modern AAC apps now include musical features. For instance, you can program a device to play a short musical phrase before or after a message. So when a child selects, I'm happy, the device might play a few notes of a cheerful tune, reinforcing the emotional content. You're absolutely right to consider that. With teenagers, we pivot to their musical interests hip hop, pop, rock, whatever they're passionate about. We might help them create personalized ringtones for their AAC devices or develop rap style rhythmic patterns for complex expressions. One teen I worked with programmed his device to beatbox before delivering messages. It was cool, it was his, and it worked brilliantly for peer interactions.
Oh, wow. That's like adding emotional context through music. What about low tech AAC? How does music fit in there?
Low tech solutions are actually where music can be most creative. Picture exchange systems can be paired with songs. Imagine a communication board where each picture has an associated musical cue. The child points to water, and you sing a little water song while providing the drink.
I'm getting so many ideas, but let's be honest. Parents are often juggling so much. What would you say are the biggest challenges you see parents facing when trying to implement these strategies?
Time and consistency are huge challenges, Sarah. Parents feel like they need to be musical experts, which isn't true at all.
Yes, I hear this all the time. I can't carry a tune or I'm not musical. How do you address that?
I tell them it's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent and enthusiastic. Children respond to your engagement, not your pitch accuracy. Simple rhythm patterns made with kitchen pots are just as effective as professional instruments.
Exactly. And the beauty is that children don't judge, they just want that connection. What about when progress seems slow? Parents get discouraged when they don't see immediate results.
That's so important to address. Musical language intervention is a long term investment. Brain plasticity research shows that it takes consistent exposure over months to create lasting neural changes. But even small improvements in attention, engagement, or turn taking are meaningful progress.
That's such an important point. Sometimes we're so focused on speech output that we miss other crucial communication skills developing. Lisa, let's talk about our speech language pathologist listeners. What specific strategies should they consider? I love that example. Let's dive into some common troubleshooting scenarios. What happens when a child seems interested in music but isn't engaging with the AAC part? I know this frustrates parents.
For SLPs, I recommend starting with a musical communication assessment. Observe how the client responds to different musical elements. Do they prefer rhythm, melody, or harmony? Do they move to music? Do they attempt vocalizations during songs? This is actually more common than parents realize, and it's often a timing issue. We might be expecting AAC interaction too early in the process. Sometimes children need weeks or even months of just enjoying musical activities before they're ready to add the communication layer. I always tell parents if your child is engaging with music, celebrating, moving to the beat, you're building the foundation. The AAC connection will come.
So you're essentially mapping their musical strengths before designing interventions. That's so reassuring to hear. What about the opposite problem? A child who uses their AAC device effectively but shows no interest in musical elements at all.
Exactly. Then we can design personalized musical AAC interventions. For a client who responds strongly to rhythm, we might use drumming patterns to teach sentence structures. 4 beats for I want cookie, please, for example.
Great question. First, I'd examine what we mean by music. Maybe they don't respond to melodies, but what about rhythm? environmental sounds, spoken word with rhythmic patterns. Sometimes we discover that children are responding to musical elements we hadn't considered. I worked with one child who showed no interest in traditional music, but was fascinated by the rhythmic patterns of windshield wipers and mechanical sounds. We built from there. That's brilliant. You're giving them a physical, auditory framework for language structure. What about collaboration between SLPs and music therapists? How does that work? That's such a creative approach. I want to talk about family dynamics for a moment. How can siblings be involved in musical AAC activities? I think this is something families don't always consider.
Interdisciplinary collaboration is gold standard care, Sarah. Music therapists bring specialized knowledge about musical techniques, while SLPs contribute expertise in communication goals and AAC technologies. Together, they create comprehensive treatment plans. Siblings can be incredible allies in this process. They often naturally understand how to modify activities and make them fun. I encourage families to create musical games where everyone participates. Maybe a family band where one child uses traditional instruments while their sibling contributes through their AAC device. Siblings often become the best peer models for turn taking and musical interaction patterns.
Mhm. But I know many families don't have access to music therapists. Are there ways SLPs can incorporate these techniques without that specialized training?
Absolutely. There are evidence based protocols that SLPs can learn. The key is understanding that you're not providing music therapy. You're using musical elements to enhance communication therapy. Start simply with rhythmic chanting to build core vocabulary.
This is crucial, Julissa. I always recommend that parents document what works at home. Video examples of successful musical AAC interactions can be incredibly persuasive. Most educators want to see evidence based practices. When you can show an IEP team that musical elements increased your child's communication attempts by 300% at home, they pay attention. I also suggest connecting with the school's music teacher. They're often excited to collaborate and can become powerful advocates. Let's get really practical now. Can you walk us through a typical session where you're integrating music with AAC training?
That's excellent advice about documentation. Let's address the elephant in the room: cost. Musical therapy, specialized apps, instruments, it can add up quickly. What are some budget friendly ways families can start incorporating these strategies? Sure. Let's say we're working with a 7-year-old who's learning to request preferred activities. We start with a familiar song, maybe "If you're happy and you know it, press the button. If you're happy and you know it, press the button." I'm so glad you brought this up. You don't need expensive equipment to get started. Your smartphone probably has free music apps and recording capabilities. Empty containers make excellent drums. Wooden spoons, pot lids, rice and sealed containers, these create rich musical experiences. YouTube has thousands of free songs specifically designed for AAC users. The most expensive piece of equipment you need is creativity, and that's free.
Oh, I love how you're embedding the AAC action right into the song. I love that perspective. Now, our listeners come from diverse cultural backgrounds. How does musical AAC work for multilingual families or families who want to incorporate their cultural musical traditions?
Right. And while we're singing, the child is physically interacting with their AAC device. The rhythm helps them anticipate when to press the button. It becomes a whole body learning experience: auditory, visual, motor, and cognitive systems all working together. This is where musical AAC becomes incredibly rich. Music is universal, but every culture has unique rhythmic patterns, scales, and instruments. I've worked with families who incorporated traditional drums, string instruments, and folk songs into their AAC practice. A child learning Spanish might use the rhythm of cumbia or salsa to practice verb conjugations on their device. Cultural music often carries deep emotional resonance that can accelerate learning and connection. That's incredible. What kind of outcomes are you seeing with this approach? The data is really encouraging. A study published in the Journal of Music Therapy showed that children receiving musical AAC interventions demonstrated 40% faster acquisition of new vocabulary compared to traditional methods alone.
Wow, 40% faster. That's significant. But beyond the numbers, what are you noticing in terms of engagement and motivation?
That's where the magic really happens. Children who were previously reluctant to use their AAC devices suddenly become eager participants. Music transforms what might feel like work into something joyful and social.
And that's so important because communication is inherently social, isn't it? Music helps create those social connections that might otherwise be challenging. Lisa, I want to dive deeper into the research for a moment. You mentioned that 40% faster vocabulary acquisition. Are there other measurable outcomes that families should know about?
Absolutely. And here's something interesting. Research from McGill University found that musical activities increase oxytocin production, the hormone associated with bonding and social connection. So we're literally creating neurochemical conditions that support relationship building. Absolutely. A longitudinal study from the University of Kansas followed children for 2 years and found significant improvements beyond just vocabulary. We're seeing increased session attention spans. Children who previously engaged for 5 to 10 minutes were sustaining focus for 20 to 30 minutes. Social initiation behaviors increased by an average of 65%. Perhaps most importantly, family reported stress levels decreased significantly when musical elements were incorporated into daily routines.
That's fascinating. So the benefits extend beyond just language development to social and emotional growth, too. Now, let's address something parents often worry about. Are there any children for whom musical approaches might not be appropriate?
That last point about family stress is so important. As parents, we can get so focused on communication goals that we forget about the emotional well being of the whole family. How does reducing that stress impact the child's progress? That's a thoughtful question. While most children can benefit from musical elements, some individuals with sensory processing differences might find certain musical stimuli overwhelming. The key is individualizing the approach. It's huge. When families are stressed, children absorb that energy. Chronic stress actually impairs learning and memory consolidation. It's neurobiological fact. Music naturally reduces cortisol levels and increases feel good neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So, when we make AAC practice joyful and musical, we're creating optimal brain states for learning. It becomes a positive feedback loop. Less stress leads to better learning, which leads to more success, which reduces stress further.
So it's about finding what works for each individual child.
Absolutely. Maybe rhythm works better than melody for one child, or perhaps softer acoustic sounds are preferable to electronic music. It's about observing and adapting. Even children with sound sensitivities might benefit from vibrotactile elements, feeling rhythm through touch.
That's a great point. So many different ways to access musical elements. Let's talk about technology for a moment. Are there specific apps or tools that integrate music and AAC effectively?
The technology is rapidly evolving. There are specialized apps like Music Therapy AAC that combine musical activities with communication goals. Even simple recording features let families create personalized musical messages.
Oh, personalized musical messages. That sounds wonderful. Can you give us an example?
Sure, imagine programming a child's device so that when they select Good Morning, it plays a recording of the family singing Good Morning to you to the tune of Happy Birthday. It's personal, musical, and meaningful.
I love that. It brings the family's unique personality into the communication device. Now, as we're wrapping up, let's give our listeners some concrete takeaways. What would be your top 3 recommendations for parents starting this journey?
First, start simple and be consistent. Pick one familiar song and incorporate it into daily routines. Second, follow your child's musical interests. If they love drums, use drumming. If they prefer quiet melodies, start there. Third, celebrate small progress. Every head nod to music, every attempt at vocalization during songs, every increased attention span is meaningful.
Those are perfect. And for our SLP listeners,
I'd say first, assess musical responsiveness as part of your evaluation process. Second, collaborate with music therapists when possible, but don't let lack of access prevent you from incorporating musical elements. Third, document musical responses alongside traditional communication data. You might be surprised at what you discover about your client's strengths.
excellent advice. Before we close, Lisa, where do you see this field heading in the future?
I'm really excited about the possibilities, Jaleesa. We're seeing the development of AI powered AAC devices that can adapt their musical elements to individual preferences in real time. Brain computer interfaces that respond to musical neural patterns. Virtual reality environments where children can practice communication skills in musical contexts. The integration of music in AAC is just beginning to reach its potential.
Wow, that sounds like something from science fiction, but in the best way possible. What gives you the most hope about this work?
Honestly, it's the joy factor. When we add music to AAC, we're not just teaching communication skills, we're creating opportunities for joy, connection, and self expression. Every child deserves to feel the power of their voice, whether that voice comes through speech, AAC, or a combination of both enhanced by music.
That's beautifully said. And I think that's what our listeners need to remember. This isn't about perfection, it's about connection. Music has this incredible power to break down barriers and create bridges between people.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, remember that every family's musical AAC journey will look different. Trust the process, trust your child's responses, and don't be afraid to get creative. Some of the most effective interventions come from families who adapt these principles to their unique circumstances.
Perfect advice to end on. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your expertise and passion with us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Communication Connections. Remember, we'll have links to research studies, recommended apps, and practical resources in our show notes.
Thank you. And remember, every voice matters, whether it sings, speaks, or communicates through the magic of music and technology combined.
Until next time, keep connecting, keep communicating, and keep discovering the power of every individual's unique voice. We'll see you next episode.